to shed more light on nonviolence as a peacemaking tool. So we have two gentlemen that are going to handle this for us. We have Mr. Andrew Sheldon from United States of America, and we have Mr. Leo Jarrison from Zimbabwe. So I'm going to start with Mr. Andrew. We'll get to know him, who he is and what he has been doing in regards to entrenching peace in our society and the world as a whole. So Mr. Andrew Sheldon is founder and director of Global Strategy of Nonviolence and the creator and developer of a new global peace movement called Global Movement of Nonviolence for the children, which is abbreviated as a GMofNV. And it is designed to unite the world and change our culture of violence. The plan for Global Movement of Nonviolence have been presented to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres staff. And it includes the structure, operating system to start and sustain the movement with the funding, marketing, and outreach. It also includes the administration, implementation, the follow-up plans, and the leadership to carry out these noble projects. Mr. Andrew has a business background as a manager in restaurants, hotels, and country clubs. He has worked with Miss Yolanda King, the daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King, and Arun Gandhi, the grandson of the legendary Mahatma Gandhi. Mr. Andrew is a 20-year member of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and is also a 15-year member of the National Organization for Women, which is known as NOW in the United States of America, and is also an avid follower of Gold Pink, Women for Peace, an organization that is also into entrenching peace in the society. Mr. Leo Jarrison is a pastor. That's our second speaker. He is a pastor and a peace practitioner in Zimbabwe, and he has been training communities and peace building initiatives. And he's also going to be like Mr. Andrew is also going to shed light on nonviolence as it is practiced in our society and the world as a whole. So we are going to start with Mr. Andrew. Mr. Andrew has a huge package for us in terms of nonviolence resistance. So he's going to open the floor. He's going to start the webinar with his presentation. So I want each and every one of us to follow him and listen attentively. We have a lot to share in this webinar. So Mr. Andrew, can go on. Let's have your presentation. Let's have you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Muhammad. Namaste, salam, shalom, peace, alafia, mir. I'm very honored to be here today. Thank you, Muhammad. It's nice to meet you, Pastor Lloyd Jarrison. The world crises are getting worse, and the war in Ukraine has changed the world for the worst towards militarism and division. Everyone in every country is faced with incredible problems and hardships, let alone war. It's time for change, and nonviolence is the answer. It's time to unite. We have to make it happen. If we don't just do it now, it will never happen. The governments will not fix our problems. The only way is to unite. Therefore, I say that the truth to power. We have an amazing opportunity at our fingertips. I have a plan prepared for a new global peace movement called a global movement of nonviolence for the children. As an emergency plan, the children and no violence are the motivation for the world to unite. So I'm here to promote nonviolence. Therefore, my presentation today about nonviolence as a tool and a proposal for a new global movement is also, I'd like to add that I recommend something different, something outside of the box to go along with a movement of nonviolence. I propose that the best possible representatives of nonviolence are asked to lead the movement. I ask that non-governmental women leaders rise up and unite to be the first to promote nonviolence, and then invite the men. This is when the movement starts. In the beginning, we want to promote nonviolence. And I do this because we need an advantage. We need an edge, something that captures the attention of the people and the world. So I would like to discuss women leading the way, though, another time. Today, I want to speak about nonviolence as a tool, as an emergency plan. And I want to talk about Secretary General Guterres from the United Nations. And lastly, then I have a few requests of everybody. At the end, we'll have a question and answer period. And the main point that I want to point out is that we can unite, and the movement can begin in the beginning of 2023, the beginning of next year. A major segment is dedicated to local application. So it's not just about global, it's about how can we work locally and also unite globally. So thank you. I'm asking you to do what has never done before, has never been done before, to promote nonviolence on a global scale. So thank you. I'm going to share my screen now to talk about nonviolence as a tool. And before I start, Mohammed, there's a new person that wants to join in. I'm going to press admit, and that should start.
Yes, do that. I've not been seeing them on my screen here. I think you can add them. If you add them, you can add that person.
Yes.
But here with me, I've not seen the. I've not been seeing them.
I thought he put you as co-host. So
yes,
I'll watch. If I see someone, I'll admit them.
Okay, that's good.
Welcome, everyone.
Great.
I'll be speaking now about nonviolence as a tool, and also about the global movement of nonviolence, how they work together, because it's time to promote the power of nonviolence. I believe nonviolence reduces the threat of violence. It diffuses the crises that erupt around the world and our individual crisis. It creates change. We can change ourselves and change our cultures of violence. And it creates goodwill, kindness, generosity, compassion, tolerance, forgiveness, and genuine caring. It creates trust and respect among nations and people. Because without trust and respect, there will be no peace. And nonviolence creates courage when there are large groups adhering to nonviolence. And that's what we want to do. We want it to be everywhere. And nonviolence is a sign of power. Power of the people. Power of unity and power of a united goal, which I'll talk about in a moment, but also power of love, the power of faith, and the power of hope. So it's a tool to attain political clout, a tool for coexistence and for social, economic, and political paradigm change. So I'd like to ask everyone to please mute themselves. Thank you. Nonviolence creates opportunity, the unexpected, the philosophical, ideological, and the psychological. So I'm going to share another screen right now. And here's what Martin Luther King said in the last sermon of his life. He says at the end, nothing will be done until people of goodwill put their bodies and their souls in motion. And that's what this is all about. We want to set an example around the world. And Gandhi, he said, we may never be strong enough to be entirely nonviolent in thought, word, and deed, but we must keep nonviolence as our goal and make strong progress towards it. Wow, what a great quote. That's one of my favorites. Whoops. Wrong one, sorry. And Gandhi and the whole world, when the war in Ukraine started, the whole world was saying, let's stop the war. No war. And then I found this poster. All the people of all countries want peace. This poster says it all. It's fantastic. I love it. And this is one of my favorites that I was talking about, is that for the children and for no violence, promoting nonviolence, mothers will do anything to defend their children. And so will the men. It's not just about women, but it's about passion and who wants to save the world. We all do. But as a strategy, let's put women in the front once the movement starts. Because now we have to just promote nonviolence. That's the first thing. Promote that it's coming. There's a movement of nonviolence coming. There's our power. There's our strength as a people movement. And so, if we unite in a global movement of nonviolence for the children, we can create worldwide unity. We have to balance the scales, because right now the scales are tipped, and all the corporations and the military are holding down the scale. I call it a behemoth. But we can work for world peace by joining together. So lastly, my quote is that a global movement of nonviolence for the children is designed to unite the people of the world, all the religions, the movements, and mayors and community leaders in every village, town, and city in every country under one umbrella: nonviolence. It'll enlist all the labor movement, the youth, all the young people from around the world, the indigenous people that are showing us that the climate is the most important. Everyone can unite. And without the people in every country participating, there will be no peace and no change. All the sages throughout time have promoted nonviolence. Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, the prophet, the peacemaker. When he was a young man, he was trying to bring up all the people together, but they weren't. They were fighting. He had to try and stop the fighting, but people were trying to kill him. And so he had to defend himself. And so he got the people together to fight because he had to survive. But his objective was to bring people together and say, no more war, no more fighting. And it worked. He conquered the other people. He beat them. He had to fight, but he beat them. Now we're going to do it differently now in the new age, in this modern era with Zoom meetings. We can do it differently. But the point is, he was the peacemaker, as all the sages. So let's see how the tools work in a global movement of nonviolence. It's a plan to unite the world, as I just mentioned. It promotes a new narrative of committing to nonviolence and committing to working together for humanity, helping others. That's the constructive Gandhi segment. And then there's the obstructive. Yes, we have to mobilize and use nonviolent direct action and civil resistance. But the important part is we have to train to commit to nonviolence. That's what Gandhi and King did. They asked the people, the first thing they asked was to commit to nonviolence and practice committing to nonviolence. It won't be easy and it'll be risky. A global movement of nonviolence promotes nonviolence as the doctrine for all countries and societies. We already use law and morals from our religions and from our cultures as a tool of society. It's a tool for right and wrong. It's a great teaching tool. So now we become the teachers and the students all at the same time by promoting nonviolence as the goal, not just adhering to nonviolence. We want to make it the goal. It tells people what we're doing. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm promoting a global movement of nonviolence. Oh, there's an immediate understanding. So the title is important, and our greetings. That's why today I started with namaste, salam, shalom, right from the start. We want people to know we're not a threat. And that's why in the olden days, that's how the words came about. Salam, shalom, peace. Because when you met someone you met for the first time, you wanted to make sure that they knew you were not a threat. So that's a tool promoting nonviolence. But it creates an immediate challenge because some people are angry, they're distraught emotionally, they have financial problems. But nonviolence can calm everything and help diffuse the crisis. it's a message that something is not right. No, that's right. Our world isn't having big problems. Something isn't right. But it needs to be fixed. So the political goal that the leaders will be asked is, first, the people will, in every country, will ask their leaders in the movement to demand that their own country renounce war, which affects all issues. There it is. It'll affect everything. And that's what we have to do is, as a global unity, global united message, we have to stop war so we can address all the world crises. So it's a tool of communication and socialization so that we can tell the people that we're doing this to illustrate for the children that we can resolve our conflicts nonviolently. So thank you. This is all about what can I do. At the end of every important meeting that I went to, at the end, the people always ask the speakers, what can I do? Well, in the beginning of a global movement of nonviolence, it's all about outreach and promotion. So here's a request. Please, if you want to join with and work directly with the global movement of nonviolence, or when you're promoting your own cause, because we're all busy and we can't all join, but while you're promoting your own cause, also promote the mother movement, a global movement of nonviolence. Make sure everyone knows about it. And they know that it's everywhere, in every country. And now I'd like to talk about how, on a global level, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has set the stage. He profoundly called for a global ceasefire, which to me is the same as saying no violence. And so Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, has the world microphone to promote a global movement of nonviolence as the people movement to support the ceasefire. So I'm going to ask the Secretary General to reissue the ceasefire. He has the power to assemble leaders, philanthropists, media, and civil society experts. Why? To provide the means for the leaders to operate so they'll be successful. So I have the plan, and I'm going to propose that the Secretary General assemble a meeting of the leaders and the philanthropists and the media and civil society experts. And we're going to set a chain reaction in motion, a chain reaction of all the leaders everywhere joining, and they'll then enlist their own constituents. This is the moment in time we can change history and make history. So I'd like to ask you to promote that a global movement is coming. I'm sorry, a global movement of nonviolence is coming. That's the simplicity of it. So for right now, until things are ready to start with the main event, and before there's an announcement by the leaders, I'm asking you to promote that a global movement of nonviolence is coming. And also ask you to contact leaders of the peace movement and the climate movement, and ask them to contact me to help create the chain reaction. That's what I'll be asking them to do as well. And why? Because this is how we sustain our movement. because many times a movement starts up and it can't continue. It loses its power. So this is designed to sustain the movement. So in conclusion, nonviolence is the answer. It's designed to save lives. As an example, I believe the Arab Spring was a call for nonviolence. The Occupy movement, which started in the United States and spread around the world, was a call for nonviolence. Black Lives Matter in the United States and around the world is a call for nonviolence. So this is the time. We have the tools. Mohammed, thank you for asking me to talk about the tools. Yes, we have the tools now. Nonviolence is the answer. And it transcends into pragmatic steps. That's another webinar, a whole nother story. But it's time for action. It's time for something different. Because I'm sorry to say, I see trouble coming. But we can change things if we act now. Everyone can help by promoting the mother movement. It'll help your own cause. And it makes you feel good to be part of something larger than yourself. I've tried to simplify the process because the problems are so complex. But watch what happens when you promote a global movement of nonviolence, especially when you add in women into the equation. It makes people smile. It catches their attention. And that's what my objective is here today, is to catch your attention, to join with this movement, work in your own field and promote nonviolence and promote the mother movement. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you so much for that.
I'm very honored to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that outstanding presentation. I enjoy each and every one of us to key into this movement. It's a noble one, and with the cooperation, with cooperation and commitment in a consistent manner, I think we are going to achieve that goal. Because people in the past have done that, and we are living by what they have achieved in the past. Most of us are enjoying it today, like what Martin Luther King has done, what Gandhi has done. These people, they really sacrifice their life and their time to work on this particular area, which is non-violence, and it has yielded the desired goal, even while they were still alive. So I want to urge us to key into the global movement of non-violence and ensure that we take it with all seriousness. And there's a particular statement you made that I so much love. You said we should start locally and unite globally. I love that statement, that everyone should work locally. We should work from our respective countries. We should work locally, but unite globally to achieve to attain that goal of non-violence resistance. So I will, before I go on to call the next speaker, I would like you to give us an insight. You've worked with the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi and the daughter of Martin Luther King. So what can you share with us the experience? What is it like working with these people whose father and whose father, in terms of like the Martin Luther King case, whose father has really done they have done great things in terms of entrenching non-violence, and then that of that of Mahatma Gandhi. How is it like? Can you share some of your experience working with these people? At least that will also a kind of help others that are also coming to give them an insight on what is it like to work in that area of non-violence resistance. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. I'd be glad to talk about that. It was amazing meeting the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi. His name is Arun, A-R-U-N, Arun. And he's a very soft-spoken gentleman. I met him, he was about 80 years old, or maybe a little bit younger, 79, 80 years old. And he carried himself very gently and very non-threatening. He was very quiet. He was generating power by being quiet, because when he spoke, you wanted to hear every word that he said. And because he was speaking quietly, you listened very closely. It was wonderful. And I had him here for the promotion. He came to Boston in the United States to work with me to promote an initiative called the World March for Peace and Nonviolence. This was in 2009. And it was started by the humanists from Spain and from South America and from Africa. And they had an initiative to promote nonviolence around the world. It was wonderful. I was the representative for Boston, the city of Boston, and I invited Arun Gandhi here, and he worked with me for 3 different presentations to talk about nonviolence, and his grandfather, because he lived with his grandfather when he was 12 years old. So he talked about a couple of the experiences. One, in just briefly, was about that Arun had done something wrong, and Mahatma Gandhi felt it was his fault, not Arun's fault. It was his grandfather's fault for not teaching him a better lesson. And so he took upon himself to, as a penance, to walk back to where they lived instead of taking a ride. So it was just, that was the story that Arun told. It was wonderful. With regards to the daughter of Martin Luther King, she was invited to do a fundraiser for Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and I was the coordinator of the event. And she did us an acting presentation on a stage about nonviolence. It was very wonderful. And afterwards, the next day, I got to sit with her at lunch. And she was very soft-spoken as well. And she talked about her mother, because her mother had just died 4 months before that I met her. And it was a very warm, touching conversation, because she told of her mother's passion and compassion for spreading the word that Martin Luther King, her husband, had been promoting. And so it was wonderful to hear his daughter talk about her mother. They were wonderful. It was all about nonviolence. It was a wonderful experience. Thank you for asking about.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that insight. So I would like to take it to the audience. If there anyone that has a question to ask, you can unmute the mic and ask your question before we get to the next speaker. Or you can just move on to the chat box and put down your question there, and Mr. Andrew will do justice to that. So,
yes,
is anyone
Mohammed, if we could ask, yes, the people to put their question in the chat, and then if you'll introduce Reverend Jerrison, that would be best.
Okay. So we'll do exactly that. Before I go on to call on Mr. Pastor Leo Jarrison, I'll also give a little introduction about him. He's a pastor and a peace practitioner in Zimbabwe, and he has been training communities in a peace building initiative. He has done a lot of work during the crisis, during some of the crises in Zimbabwe. He has done a lot to entrench peace in most of the communities that were ravaged with violence. So I would like him to share with us some of these experience and a whole lot of things on the nonviolence as a peacemaking tool. So, Pastor Leo Jarrison, let's have you, please.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. I really appreciate, and thank you so much for having me. And I just want also to appreciate Andre for, I think, sharing. This is quite very important and something that we all need. And I'm trusting that this movement is going to make change. And it's all of us putting our hands together, and then we begin to support one another and fight, the cause of peace, in this world. And remember, conflicts will always come, but we need those particular strategies that are very positive and that can also bring change and transformation, especially in leadership and, of course, governments and, of course, communities at large. So I want to appreciate the efforts that Andre is pushing and putting through. And I am also praying and hoping, if, as part of his request, that he wants to meet Antonio Guterres, the UN chief. And I'm praying that this should happen. And we really need peace, particularly in this world. And of course, in our continents, wherever we are, and of course, in our countries, and of course, in our real communities that we really live in. So yes. I really appreciate the presentation that Andre has already given. And I'm just also going to just build up a little based on my experiences on part of what he has already shared, which is very, very important in building this particular conversation that we are having, particularly at this moment.
Yes,
and I just want
Reverend Jerrison, if you would please try and put your photo and your picture up and see it. We'll see how if it's a good link, because people would like to see you.
Okay, so that's all right.
And then if it's a bad connection, we'll go back to without it. But let's try with it.
That's okay. Thank you. Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure maybe you can hear me clearly.
Yeah, you clearly. You can hear you clearly.
Okay. Thank you so much. All right. So I think as I was just basically alluding to that, I really appreciate what Andre has shared. It's a heart and a concern for peace, especially in the world. And I want to believe that these are the initiatives that we desire and that we need, that will push through the non-violent actions that are needed to solve conflict, in whichever way. And I think my most appeal starts on the ground, the people that are on the ground, of course, going to the leaders, to the governments, or other structures that we can knit through. But I believe that we as individuals, everything starts and begins within us, within ourselves. Peace begins within ourselves. So I believe that this initiative, it is my desire that it moves through, and of course has many strides, and of course we are going to have impact, that we are going to basically have. Basically, maybe based on my sharing in terms of non-violent, looking basically a bit in Africa, and of course part of my experiences that I experienced down here in Zimbabwe. And I would want to say that, the use of the non-violence, tactics is very, very important for us to achieve peace. I am remembering the issue of the Arab Spring, if all of us are very aware of that. It got a global attention, but it was actually a non-violent movement, that was actually built, and it became a stronger argument, especially for non-violent action in the world. And looking particularly today, especially in Africa, it's very crucial. We have conflicts that are happening particularly at this moment. Issues of conflicts in South Sudan, conflicts in Mali, Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, Sudan, Liberia, Burundi. These are just some of the nations that we can name in Africa where there are some particular conflicts that are happening. But it's also very important to think about how to achieve peace, because some of these particular conflicts, they took long, and they're still there. And efforts have been made. It could be with United Nations. It could be with African Union. But still, we see that some of these conflicts are not ending. And that means that there is need to rethink, how do we solve, how do we come to manage particularly these conflicts. And then this is where the non-violent action or initiatives of peace as a tool are basically needed, so that we are able to manage and deal particularly with these particular conflicts. I see non-violence, it can be broadly, defined basically as a means where, groups, can actively then oppose. It could be systems of injustice, without using violence, but a means which then brings about desired results, but without using issues of violence. And of course, this can range from oppressive governments that are in Africa, oppressive structures of governments, that perpetuate violence, and of course, that do deepen issues of inequalities. It could be among various groups or ethnic groups within nations. So it's quite an important tool for me as I look at it. We cannot do away without looking at non-violence, particularly as a contributor, and of course as a tool that we can basically use in order for us to achieve what we want to achieve. And of course, given the fact that conflict is very central, particularly to human relationships, it then also becomes a challenge. If I may put it through that way, it becomes a challenge in terms of how do we then deal with it. It means it's bound to happen in any particular way without us, preparing for it. But then how do we deal with it? So looking at Africa, we have got quite a lot that I feel that needs to be done. And I know that we have big organizations that are already into peace building. They are trying by all means what they can to make sure that peace prevails. But of course, there are some conflicts that are so long. Some they will not end now. Some are short. Some are long. but still non-violence initiatives are very needed as a tool to make sure that this is done. And I've observed that things like non-violence act, something like civil disobedience that others have used in terms of trying to bring about managing a conflict. I've seen others trying to basically use that. Yes, they do work in some form, but of course, if we also look at the larger picture, you know, in terms of economics and all the stuff, you know, it's quite affected, particularly in those particular manner as well. So we have realized that most of the African countries, they have received, it could be their independence. Of course, some of them used violent manners. Sometimes it was war, but of course others, they did not. They used the non-violent tools, which then promoted the independence that they have today. And of course, the one fact that remains is that some of them, even after having received that independence non-violently, they are still being violent to their own citizens, you know, which is a paradox, you know, in nature, you know, as we look at that. So it's something that is also worrisome in Africa, that I don't know what really can be done, but much is needed to be done, basically in terms of that. You will see that particularly conflicts in Africa, they vary from differently depending, and of course, I also see the role of spirituality in contributing to the non-violent movement, which is an important tool that we need, especially in Africa. We know Africans are spiritual people, and I believe that spirituality also is part and parcel of this non-violent tool that we desire to contribute to make sure that acts of aggression, acts of violence, they cease, and this brings people to a level where they can, you know, dialogue on a table, negotiate, you know, without, of course, having lives lost, particularly in the processes. And so it's very important that we desire. So you see that religions such as Christianity, they do promote, for example, issues that have to do with love, truth, it becomes central. And of course, issues of reconciliation, they're also biblical. So when we take that together, I believe that preaching such a message of truth, love, and reconciliation builds up to the structures of non-violence as a tool that we desire. And that can be done in love and, of course, in respect to each other, you know, despite our differences of whatever nature that we basically have. And so it's very, very important that we basically look at that. Maybe just coming back shortly to part of my experiences, maybe in part of the work that I've been doing in Zimbabwe. I think since 2008, Zimbabwe witnessed a gruesome election, and whereby many people lost their lives. And of course, it was the bishops, the pastors who came up with an initiative which was called Ecumenical Church Leaders Forum, which was headed by Dr. Ambrose Moyo. And I also happened to become part and parcel of that particular movement and organization, which was there to promote peace. And of course, knowing that the citizens were, because of the election, because of the trauma that other people went through, there was a need for sensitization for every individual, for every citizen of the country. And so this initiative came about through the program, basically, which was called with an acronym CPMRT, meaning conflict prevention, management, resolution, and transformation. And basically, the program's idea was to sensitize the communities so that people are able to continue to engage together. Because you would find that when it comes to issues of politics, people would beat one another, there were violent clashes, people, would actually torture one another, murder, one another. But no one was, actually murdering someone because they go to another church or another denominational church, which is different from theirs. But when it comes to issues of politics, everybody's forced to have one ideology, which is, which is different, which is not true, because we are all different. We grew up differently. We have different particular backgrounds, and what formed who we are is different. So we can't expect ourselves to have the same ideology. So the idea was then to sensitize the community, the citizens, for them to understand that we are all different. Everyone has what they desire and, of course, what they want. And, of course, we want to thank God that we were successful. In the beginning, our program was not even accepted by the government. They thought that probably we were anti-government. And of course, it was so hard to penetrate through. But of course, finally, through persistence and prayer, whatever we were doing, even as church leaders, allowed God to give us a way so that we were also able to share these non-violent initiatives, which we felt were very important for our nation at that particular time. And of course, they did pay dividends. The election that followed after the 2008, it was quite an impressive election. And of course, less reports of violence as compared to 2008. And we were so happy, but it was quite difficult for us. And of course, that was important. And maybe just to share quickly something that I feel is very important for nonviolence as a tool. For us, we encouraged issues that have to do with dialogue, because we felt dialogue was the key in which is non-violent. And so dialogue, mediation, is negotiation. They became part, of what we part of what we were sensitizing to the people. And the initiatives that we brought through the non-violent peace initiative as a tool, we had issues, things like peace marches, whereby all the citizens could gather together despite their political affiliations, and of course we could march together, denouncing issues of violence, but of course promoting issues of peace. So we used peace marches. We used what we call peace tournaments, whereby we meet peace tournaments where we meet together. We've got games that are played together. People from different political parties joining together. We're trying to bring the Ubuntu flavor for Africa, where we become one thing, and that was important. And of course, for example, peace exhibition, whereby the artwork speaks about peace, and those exhibitors will then be speaking about, the sets of the art that they've created, what it means, to us together, how we can live together. And of course, something that we also did was we created entrepreneurial project to promote cohesion within the communities and the people, so that people don't have time for violence, but they've got time to build their lives, to fend for their families. And so some of them, because they didn't have anything to do, it was easy for them to become a target of violence, or to become victims or perpetrators in the process. So these are some of the things, the initiatives that we use to promote non-violence as a tool to make sure that peace basically prevails right on the grassroots level, so much even as it goes to the higher structures of the national development which of course is the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, which was branded in the Constitution of the Republic of Zimbabwe. But I think, in short, my experience is I gained much more. I learned quite a lot. And of course, meeting different kinds of people and leaders, trying to shape the communities that we desire, the communities we feel could contribute to the nation at large, so that non-violence becomes a tool whereby, even despite us having a conflict, violence is not the way to go. But non-violent actions are the ones that we desire to promote, to make sure that whatever the conflict is managed well and people can still live after in peace. So I think, in short, Maba, this is my part of my contribution to the conversation. Thank you so much, Mohammed.
Thank you so much for that beautiful presentation. In fact, there are some key points I so much appreciate, like the peace game initiative you spoke about, the peace exhibition, the entrepreneur project. These are initiatives that is very impactful, especially from the local level. And the aspect of entrepreneur project is very, very important, and it's not something. It's something that one should not play with, because anyone that is idle is prone to engage in all kinds of vices. That is why in a Center for Peace Building organization, our organization will try to incorporate that into our vision. That one should not just preach peace alone, but also ensure that you empower people that are in that region. It gives them that that sense of belonging, and that strength to want to do whatever thing that is productive. Because anyone that is hungry, you speak to him about peace, he might not really get you well. But if we have youth that are economically sound, that are empowered, it will go a long way to it will make the aspect of preaching, the aspect of preaching peace much more easier. And I thank you so much for that submission. I so much appreciate it. And I want other people to learn from you, from your initiative, which is also in line with what Mr. Andra said, that it is always good to work locally and unite globally. You people in Zimbabwe, you're able to work locally at the local level, and gradually your effort was able to bear the result that the result that now brought about the issue of reconciliation. If you have not done your work locally, it should be much more harder for the national body to really come about the issue of reconciliation. So I don't know if Mr. Andre has one or two things to say. If there is none, maybe if there's another question too. I think there's a question in the chat box for Mr. Andre. Mr. Andre, are you there? Yeah? You have a question. There's a question for you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. A very nice presentation, Reverend Jerrison. Very important. I liked your words and the phraseology. And so thank you. Yes, on the question, I'll get to the question in the chat in one moment. But I wanted to mention that you were saying, yes, how do we solve these problems? And you gave some wonderful examples. And I just want to mention one other one that I did allude to in my presentation, but I found that it's very important to have the constructive segment. And that's what you just were talking about. From a local level, that's where the pragmatic steps are very important, and they can develop through programs like both you, Reverend Jerrison, and Mohammed, that you're doing with your peace work. Excellent. And I have a suggestion then. My research shows that the people want to work together. So I propose the first thing to do is find ways to work and prioritize games and programs for the children. So people from opposite points of view, the people that are arguing or that have a conflict, as part of the conflict resolution, propose these joint efforts for the children. There's an example in Israel and Palestine. There's a group called the Middle East Alliance for Peace. Yeah, Alliance for Peace, yes. And they have a wonderful, wonderful example, if you want to look them up. Their acronym is ALLMEP, Alliance for Middle East Peace. Excellent. And I think even on a global level, same thing. That's what will be promoted, but the work comes from the grassroots. You're absolutely right, Reverend Jerrison. That's what the people know. The people know it's got to be the grassroots. So a combination of the obstructive, the civil resistance, the marches, the protests, with the constructive. We need both. So excellent. I'm so glad that your presentation was about that. That was perfect combination for global and local action. Thank you, Reverend Jerrison. And just to answer the question, it says, always easy to react in a nonviolent way when the conflict appears. Is it always? And it's probably not easy. How do we conduct ourselves as peace builders? Well, using Reverend Jerrison's example of spirituality and kindness and conversation and trying to honor the differences. That was very important. We have to show respect. Without the respect. So how do we conduct ourselves? By showing and illustrating that we're not violent. And then by proposing different programs, come up with new ideas that are specific to your own problem, but also the general one, the use of coming together for the children, to illustrate for the children. That's my recommendation and the answer to your question. Would you like to address the question, or do you have a response, Reverend Jerrison?
Okay, thank you, Andre. Yeah, maybe just to add on what you've already alluded to, I think our conduct as peace practitioners is very, very important and key, because if we show that we are inclined to the other side, and then it brings about a problem in terms of trying to manage that particular conflict. So we need to remain very apolitical in terms of what we are doing as peace practitioners. We need to remain very neutral in terms of the parties that are involved. We must not have any interest in terms of the conflict that we are dealing with. And of course, particularly at the same time, it's very important for us not to be judgmental, even for the parties that would want to assist in terms of solving those particular conflicts. And of course, one of the key things that I believe that we need to be very aware is to deal with our own perception, because our perception, they we come to that particular level, we try to deal with our own perceptions, our own way of doing or seeing things, and not allow that to disturb particularly the conversation of peace that we are actually trying to bring across. So I think as peacemakers, as peace practitioners, I believe these are also very important key elements that we must have if we are dealing with issues of conflict.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Excellent. Thank you. And Mohammed, thank you for hosting and for bringing us together. I think Reverend Jerison has a superior message. It's wonderful. Thank you, Mohammed. And thank you, Reverend Jerison.
That's all.